My son once called the surgery that would save my life a waste of money. Worse, he refused to return the $300,000 I had once given him, the money that could have kept me alive. That was the moment I decided if he could turn his back on me in my hour of need, then I would take everything from him. Mr. Delaney, your heart is in critical condition. Without surgery, you have 3 months at most, doctor. Ramirez's words landed like a sledgehammer straight into my chest, heavier than the diagnosis itself. I felt my fingers clamp down on the plastic arms of the chair, my knuckles bleaching white against the beige. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed like angry hornets, casting jagged shadows across the sterile room. On the glowing computer screen before me was my death sentence in full digital clarity. She rotated the monitor toward me and tapped at the grayscale images with the end of her pen. These blockages here, and this major one. She circled a dark cluster that resembled storm clouds. They're cutting off blood flow to your heart muscle. We need to perform a triple bypass immediately. The room seemed to tilt, the walls stretching farther away as though I were falling backward. I forced myself to focus on her face instead of the medical images that screamed doom. How much time do I have to arrange things? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. The surgery must be done within 2 weeks, she said, carefully enunciating every word as though they were final. Any longer. She let the sentence drift into the sterile air between us, unfinished but complete enough. My phone felt like a brick in my pocket. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, the cold glow of the banking app burning against my eyes. The loading screen spun for an eternity before the numbers appeared. $23,000. $23,000. My life's savings, the slow accumulation of decades under the blistering Texas sun, working oil rigs where men broke their backs and their bones for a paycheck. A fortune to most, but nothing compared to what I needed. The cost will be $300,000, Dr. Ramirez continued, her tone even, polished with that clinical sympathy doctors master. Full payment is required before we can schedule the procedure. It's hospital policy. 300,000. The number detonated in my mind like a gunshot ricocheting through an empty warehouse. I stared at my phone screen, willing those digits to multiply, begging for a miracle that would never come. I don't have that kind of money, I whispered, the admission tasting like blood in my mouth. Doctor. Ramirez slid open her desk drawer and placed a manila folder in front of me. The scrape of paper on paper seemed unnaturally loud. Then I'm afraid there's nothing we can do. I'll need you to sign this treatment refusal form. Wait, I croaked. What about a payment plan? Insurance? Something? Her head moved side to side, slow and mechanical like a pendulum. Your insurance covers routine care, not major surgical procedures, and our financial department doesn't offer plans for surgeries of this cost. I'm sorry, Mr. Delaney. The folder lay between us like a death certificate waiting for my signature. My chest tightened, a cruel preview of the pain that would soon consume me. The lights above seemed harsher, crueler now, exposing every flaw, every vulnerability. I stood too quickly, and the room spun, my vision stuttering. I stuffed the medical forms into my jacket pocket, their crinkles sounding like dry leaves underfoot. There has to be another way, I muttered, but Dr. Ramirez was already reaching for the next patient's file. I stumbled through the automatic glass doors into the unforgiving Texas heat. The smell of antiseptic still clung to my clothes, mixing unpleasantly with the scent of asphalt baking under the sun. My truck sat waiting in the parking lot. My old Ford pickup, faithful and worn, its once blue paint now faded to gray in patches where the sun had gnawed at it for 15 years. I fumbled the keys into the ignition. The engine coughed to life on the third try, its rattling churn reminding me how everything in my world, my heart included, was breaking down. Highway 35 unspooled ahead like a black ribbon through San Antonio's sprawling industrial skeleton. The radio droned some country ballad about lost love and whiskey. I flicked it off, preferring the suffocating silence. My mind was already traveling backward, 3 years into the past, to a conversation that had seemed innocent at the time, but now twisted like a knife in my gut. I pulled into a near-empty roadside rest stop, leaving the engine idling so the air conditioning could fight back the brutal heat. My phone's glow lit up my face. Marcus Delaney. My son. His name sat there on the screen, unchanged for years, as ordinary as any other contact, but the weight of it nearly buckled me. My thoughts dragged me back to our kitchen 3 years ago, where sunlight had spilled through the blinds and dust motes drifted lazily between us. Marcus had spread real estate papers across that table like a general planning his campaign. He was 32 then, sharp and ambitious, his hair neatly cut, his smile so achingly reminiscent of his mother's that I could almost hear her voice in the room. "Dad, I found the perfect house," he had said, his eyes gleaming with excitement, "but I need help with the down payment." The memory replayed in cruel clarity, my coffee mug cooling in my hand, his voice steady, persuasive. "This is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back as soon as the business stabilizes. You know I'm good for it." I had believed him. How could I not? He was my boy, the very reason I had sweated under the Texan sun for so many years. He spoke of a home in Alamo Heights, of property values climbing, of securing his family's future, and when he named the number 280,000, I had hesitated only a moment before breaking open every account, liquidating every hard-earned reserve, even the inheritance from my father's estate. It had taken 3 weeks to pull it together, but I'd done it, without question, without hesitation, because that was what fathers did. And now, years later, sitting in a rest stop with death's countdown ticking inside my chest, I understood the irony, that the amount I had given him then was almost exactly what I needed now. I gripped the wheel, and turned the truck toward Alamo Heights, past the strip malls, past the gas stations, past the line dividing ordinary San Antonio from the manicured lawns and iron gates of the wealthy North Side. The closer I drew to Marcus's house, the more my stomach twisted. I swung through a McDonald's drive-thru for a black coffee, needing the bitter heat to keep me focused. The girl at the window, just a kid with braces and kind eyes, handed me the cup, and for a second I felt a pang of something like guilt. There was still innocence in this world, still kindness, just not in my son. Each mile carried me deeper into a neighborhood where cars gleamed in driveways and lawns were as green as golf courses, their upkeep costing more than most men's yearly wages. "He's my son," I reminded myself as I turned down his street. "My only son. He won't let me die." I parked behind his polished BMW, the car gleaming like a trophy of success, and climbed the steps to his front door. The doorbell chimed a cheerful tune that likely cost more than my monthly groceries. Through the frosted glass, I saw his shadow approach. The door swung open, and there he was, Marcus, barefoot, in a navy polo and khakis, looking every bit the comfortable suburban king. His brows lifted in mild surprise. "Hey, Dad," he said. Marcus glanced at his watch, the gesture so casual, so instinctive, that it felt like an insult, as though the minutes he spent with me were already too many. "What's the surprise visit about?" he asked, his voice smooth but tinged with annoyance. "Son," I said, steadying myself, "I need to talk to you. It's important." He stepped aside, but even in that small motion I could see the hesitation in his body, the guarded posture of a man already building walls before a word had been exchanged. The entryway opened into a living room that screamed of success. His success, built on the foundation of my sacrifice. The air smelled faintly of leather and expensive candles. Dark brown couches framed a stone fireplace, above which hung family portraits encased in heavy, gleaming frames. A chandelier dangled overhead, scattering fractured prisms of light across polished hardwood floors. Every detail was calculated, curated, and every inch of it had been bought, in part, with my money. Marcus drifted toward a built-in bar, tucked neatly against the far wall. He lifted a crystal decanter and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. The amber liquid caught the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glowing like molten gold. He didn't offer me a drink. Not even water. "Have a seat," he said, motioning toward the couch with his glass, his tone dismissive, as though he were hosting a client rather than his own father. I sank into the leather cushions. They groaned softly beneath my weight, swallowing me in a way that made me feel smaller, diminished. My work shirt and faded jeans seemed painfully out of place here, like rags against royalty. I shifted forward, uneasy, the hospital papers in my jacket pocket crinkling like dry leaves in autumn. From the kitchen came the faint sounds of family life. Anna's gentle voice, the cheerful bursts of children's laughter. That domestic symphony should have comforted me. After all, hadn't I helped orchestrate it? Hadn't I poured my life savings into making this picture-perfect existence possible? Marcus, I said finally, my voice low but steady. I went to the doctor today. The cardiologist. That got his attention. His posture stiffened ever so slightly, though he remained standing, glass in hand, towering above me. The imbalance in our positions was clear, him upright and commanding, me slouched and pleading. "Everything okay?" he asked. My heart's failing. The words fell out flat, stripped of any drama, because there was no need for embellishment. They were grim enough as they were. "Without surgery, I have 3 months, at best." The glass froze halfway to his lips. For a brief flicker of time, I saw it, real concern etched across his face, raw and unguarded, but it vanished quickly, replaced by calculation. "Jesus, Dad," he muttered. "How much will the surgery cost?" 300,000. They want it up front. He took a long sip of whiskey, deliberately slow, letting the silence drag out between us. Buying time. Avoiding responsibility. From the kitchen doorway, Anna appeared. She caught sight of the two of us and froze. Her eyes flickered between us, lips parting as if to speak, but then the children called her name, and she vanished back into the safety of her role. "That's a lot of money," Marcus said at last. I leaned forward, the papers in my pocket pressing sharply against my ribs. "You remember the money I loaned you for this house? I need you to pay it back." The change in his expression was immediate, jarring. The flicker of concern died, replaced by something colder, something harder. He set his glass down on the bar cart with precise control, the crystal clicking against wood like the slam of a gavel. His jaw tightened. His voice carried an edge I had never heard before. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about that?" The question didn't seek an answer. It was a challenge, a dismissal. The afternoon sunlight pouring in through his pristine windows seemed suddenly harsh, glaring, accusatory. My chest constricted, not from the disease, but from the sharp cut of betrayal. Marcus began pacing, the whiskey sloshing in his glass. His voice rose with each step, the polished professional veneer peeling away to reveal the raw arrogance beneath. "Dad, don't you get it? That money went into this house, into my family's future. It's not just lying around waiting to be handed back to you." I gripped my knees, grounding myself against the couch. His words burrowed deep, each one heavy with finality. "But you promised," I said softly. "You promised to pay it back. You called it a loan." He laughed. Bitter, ugly, a sound that made my skin crawl. "That wasn't a loan, Dad. That was family helping family. And frankly, surgery at that price is a waste of money." The words struck harder than any heart attack ever could. Waste of money, my life, his father's life, reduced to an unworthy expense. "How can you say that?" My voice cracked. "I'm your father." From the kitchen doorway, Anna appeared again. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly shut. She looked like a ghost, a witness trapped in someone else's nightmare. The children's laughter had gone silent, as if even they felt the poison saturating the air. Marcus stopped pacing. He turned toward me, his face set like stone. "You've lived long enough, Dad. I have to think about my kids. Their future matters more than buying you a few extra years." My chest burned, sharp pain radiating down my arm. I gasped for breath, trying to rise, but my legs buckled, sending me back down into the couch. My vision blurred, edges darkening. "Get out," Marcus said flatly, striding to the door. He pulled it wide open, and the furnace heat of the Texas afternoon spilled into his air-conditioned palace. "Get out of my house, and don't come back with these ridiculous demands." I staggered to my feet, one hand pressed to my chest, the other gripping the couch arm for leverage. Anna stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, shame etched into her features, but she said nothing, did nothing. She chose silence, the safety of her gilded life, over the simplest act of human decency. The walk to the door felt endless, each step sending shockwaves of pain through my body. And yet Marcus stood firm, offering no hand, no help, no trace of the boy I had raised through sleepless nights after his mother's death. He simply waited, a cold sentinel, until I passed him. "You're making a mistake," I whispered as I stepped into the blaze of the sun. "The only mistake," he replied without hesitation, "was thinking you'd understand priorities." I stumbled down the steps, fumbling with my keys. The pain in my chest rivaled the pain in my heart, both clawing at me as I sank into the driver's seat. The engine groaned to life, and I pulled away, leaving behind the house my money had built, and the son who would rather watch me die than surrender a fraction of his comfort. The drive back to the south side was a blur, traffic rushing past in feverish smears of color and sound. The words echoed in my head with each agonizing heartbeat. Waste of money. By the time I reached the vacant lot beside the abandoned oil derricks, the sun was setting, painting the sky in fire and blood. The skeletal towers loomed above me, monuments to 30 years of sweat and sacrifice. Their shadows stretched long across cracked asphalt, where stubborn weeds broke through the concrete, reminders that life could endure even in desolation. I shut off the engine, and sat in the cab, the air conditioner humming softly. My glove compartment creaked open, and my fingers found the manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out, spreading the brittle papers and faded photographs across the passenger seat. There I was, 1985, just 24, grinning ear to ear in oil-stained coveralls, helmet pushed back on my head. The drilling rig loomed behind me, my world back then, and beside me stood men I'd called brothers. In the background, younger and stronger than I remembered him, was Hank Miller, my partner in those days, a man who'd worked alongside me until the wells dried up, and the company moved west. I stared at the photo, my pulse loud in my ears, and a thought began to form, a solution darker, sharper, and far more final than anything I had ever considered before. Another photograph stopped me cold. It was from Marcus's high school graduation, a day I used to think of with nothing but pride. There we were, father and son, both wearing suits that had cost me a full week's wages. I remembered how the fabric itched against my skin, but I wore it like armor because that day wasn't about me. It was about him. My boy standing tall as he crossed that stage, diploma in hand, future spread wide before him, like a promise whispered by God himself. I had been so proud, nearly bursting at the seams. Every scholarship application I'd stayed up late helping him with, every late fee I'd scraped together when money was tighter than a clenched fist, all of it had led to that moment. I thought I was building a foundation under his feet, never once imagining that same foundation would later feel like the stones tied to my ankles. But the most painful photograph wasn't from that graduation. No, the one that burned was from 2022, Marcus and Anna sitting at their kitchen table, the young couple glowing as they signed the papers to their first house. I was across from them, my checkbook open like a sacrificial offering. I could still hear Marcus's voice as if he were standing right here beside me, his hand firm on my shoulder. "Dad, I'll pay you back as soon as the construction business gets stable. This is a loan, not a gift. I promise you'll get every penny back." His words had etched themselves into me like commandments carved in stone. That day, Hank Miller had been there too, my old friend, sweating through his shirt as he helped me lug furniture into the house. He'd heard it all, the promise, the handshake, the words that had felt like a bond stronger than blood. I pulled out my phone with fingers that trembled less than my heart, scrolling to Hank's name. The line clicked after the second ring. "Vernon, how's retirement treating you, old friend?" His voice was warm, easy, but my reply came out steadier than I felt. "Hank, I need your help. Do you remember when I loaned Marcus money for his house? You were there when he promised to pay me back." There was a pause, a quiet in which I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its casual tone, sharpened into something solemn. Of course I remember. You made it clear it was a loan, not a gift. Marcus shook your hand like a man, looked you dead in the eye, and said he'd pay you back. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I need you to be willing to testify to that if it comes to it. Of course, buddy. That boy made you a promise, and a promise is a promise, but what's going on? So I told him. I told him everything. Marcus's cruel dismissal, his words cutting me down like I was nothing, a life's worth of sacrifice belittled to dust. Hank didn't interrupt, but I could hear his breathing grow heavier, slower, angrier. That ungrateful little snake, he finally spat. After everything you gave up for him. His voice trailed off, heavy with disgust. By the time I hung up, I had already pulled a notebook from the center console and started writing down names of lawyers. A plan was taking shape, cold and deliberate. By the time I reached my house, that plan was etched into 3 pages, 3 law offices to call, 3 doors to knock on, 3 chances to make Marcus regret the day he told me my life was a waste. That night I didn't sleep. Sleep was impossible anyway. My chest felt bound in iron, every breath tight with rage and heartbreak. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, turning it into a war room. Documents lay spread in chaotic order, bank statements, canceled checks, letters, receipts, all the evidence of the years I had bled myself dry to help him. The room felt different under the dim kitchen light, less like a home and more like a battlefield. Every scrap of paper was a weapon, every memory a sharpened blade. When dawn finally came, I was still awake, my eyes gritty, my hands trembling from too much coffee and too much fury. Marcus's words still rang in my head. You wasted your life. No, I hadn't wasted my life. I had invested it, and now it was time to collect. The law office downtown was an old building that had seen better decades. Its brickwork sagged with the weight of forgotten promises, its windows so grimy they filtered sunlight into something gray and tired. The kind of place where justice wasn't pretty, but it was still possible. The elevator was broken, of course it was. So I took the stairs, each step a reminder that my body wasn't as young as it used to be, but my resolve was sharper than ever. The 3rd floor smelled faintly of dust and old carpet. A modest reception area greeted me, family law pamphlets stacked neatly on a coffee table, certificates lining the walls, not gaudy but steady, the kind that spoke of a man who had earned them, case by case, year by year. The receptionist looked up as I entered. She was in her 50s, her kind eyes taking me in with the sort of sympathy that came from seeing too many broken families and too many old men with stories to tell. "Good morning," she said softly. "You here to see Mr. Hayes?" I nodded, clutching the folder of documents like it was both shield and sword. The line clicked, then filled with static, and then Marcus's voice exploded through the speaker, raw and furious. "How dare you?" he spat, like I'd crawled into his house and upended his life on purpose. I let him roar for a beat, listened to the anger battering my eardrums. Hayes had insisted I record the call. "I'm recording this," I said plainly, the way a man tells the time. The words calmed something inside me. They made this confrontation official, not just the mewling of an old father begging for mercy. "How dare I what?" I asked, careful to keep my voice level. The steadiness in my tone felt like armor. "Send you a demand letter, asking you to repay what you promised." "You lawyered up?" he barked. "You sent me?" He cut himself off with a laugh that was all teeth. "You can't be serious. Dad, you don't get to threaten me. This is extortion. I'll call the police." You promised me that money," I said, softer now, remembering the handshake, the look in his eyes the day he signed those papers. "You told Hank, you told me, it was a loan. I don't want to fight you. I asked you to do the right thing." There was a beat of silence, and in that nothingness I heard a child's faint voice in the background, an embarrassed clearing of a throat. Anna probably, trying not to listen. Marcus switched tactics. "You're playing games, Dad. This is public. You want drama? Fine. Don't drag my wife and kids through this." His voice dropped low, sharp with threat. If you don't pull that letter back, I'll ruin you. I'll make sure nobody hires you. Nobody trusts you. You'll be humiliated. I felt the old familiar coil of fear, but it had nothing to do with his threats. It was the other kind, the brittle, slow kind that comes from waiting rooms and doctors' offices. Marcus, I said, letting the name feel like a rope between us. You called surgery a waste of money. You told me I'd lived long enough. You walked me out of your house. I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm trying to survive, he scoffed. Survive? You want me to mortgage my kid's future. You put everything into this house, our house. You don't get to take it back, because you suddenly decide you need the cash. My health isn't sudden, I replied, surprising myself with how even my voice sounded. My surgeons told me I have months without the operation. Months. I let the silence linger long enough for the idea to land. I only asked you to honor your word. Your word doesn't change the fact that money moved, and it's my home now, he said, venom in every syllable. Either you drop this, or I'll countersue for harassment. I'll get a restraining order if you keep showing up. He spat the last sentence like a curse, and I could hear his breath quicken. You're done, Dad. Don't contact me again. You're making a mistake, I said, though the tremor in my chest was more from anger than from pain now. I won't back down. He wasted me one last withering laugh. You think you can win in court? Good luck paying Hayes's bills. You old men are all talk. The line went tinny, then dead as he hung up. For a moment I sat in my kitchen, the phone an inert weight in my hand, the recorded file quietly saving to my phone like a sealed envelope. My heart wasn't the only thing pounding. Something darker and more satisfying prickled under my skin, vindication, plain and ugly. He'd revealed his hand on the call. Threats, bluster, the kind of brittle cowardice that breaks under pressure. And he'd put his family between us like a shield. That would matter in court, the public theater of duty versus deceit. Hayes would love it. I called Hank back before I let myself think too long. He picked up on the second ring. Well? He asked. He blew up, I said. Threats and bluster. But he hung up first. I recorded it. I sent the audio file to Hayes and to myself, time-stamped and sealed. Hayes replied, with a curt message. Keep a log of every contact. Do not respond to provocations. We'll file if no satisfactory payment is made by the deadline. If he threatens you, document it. Restraining order claims from him are nothing but a stall tactic, unless he has physical proof of harassment. The lawyer's calm made me feel like chess pieces were being moved in a room I could finally see. Hayes's confidence reassured me. This was a game with rules, and I'd hired someone who knew how to play hard. That evening the house felt smaller. The kitchen table cleared but still scarred with the night's battles. I ate cold beans and dry bread, the cheap dinner of a man who'd just sunk a retainer into hope. 15,000 gone in a handshake and signature. Most of my savings bled away into the machinery that might drag what was mine back into the light. The thought was both frightening and electric. I could feel the scales tipping. Sleep came in short, shallow stabs. Every time I closed my eyes I saw that photograph from 2022. Marcus and Anna signing the papers, his hand on my shoulder as he promised repayment. That image sat behind my eyelids like an accusation I couldn't scrub away. Over the next 2 days, I kept myself busy like a man building scaffolding around his resolve. I added fresh copies of bank records to Hayes's folder, reviewed the notarized witness statement from Hank until my eyes blurred, and practiced the sequence of events in my head. The loan, the handshake, the promise, the refusal. Each step was a nail hammered in. Each nail made the structure firmer. Word spread quietly among old friends. Hank had mentioned the matter to a couple of the men from the rigs. Sympathy arrived in unexpected ways. A neighbor who owed me a favor offered to keep an eye on my mailbox. Mrs. Alvarez from the corner cafe slipped a check I couldn't accept across my hand and said, "Pay your health first, Vernon." My pride bristled, but my body thanked her silently. On the morning the certified letter should have arrived, I sat by the little window above my sink and watched the street like a man waiting for a verdict. Hayes said Marcus would have 30 days to answer the demand. If he ignored it, it would only strengthen my case. If he responded with threats and public posturing, even better, evidence of bad faith. Time, I was learning, could be a weapon as precise as any legal brief. When the mail finally came that morning, there was a blue envelope stamped with postmarks and authority. My hands shook as if the tremor were from the disease, and not from something purer, anticipation. I opened it, and found Hayes's note, delivered Wednesday, April 24th, tracked, awaiting response. A small victory, a small promise. I swallowed the last of the dry bread, and sat with my fingers steepled, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the far-off sounds of a neighborhood that went on with its life, whether I lived in it or not. I thought about Dr. Ramirez's face, the way she'd pointed at storm cloud shadows on a screen and said triple bypass. I thought about the way Marcus had looked at me across his bar, tall, comfortable, unblinking. Then I thought about the next move. Hayes would file. If Marcus ignored the letter, Marcus might fight, he might stall, but courtrooms are not like living rooms. Promises and witnesses matter there. My life had been built of small, stubborn things: dawn shifts, calloused hands, overtime checks tucked into envelopes. Those small things had left a paper trail long enough to trample his excuses. Whatever came next, I told myself, I would meet it with both hands. I had already spent the money I had to spend on hope. I'd do whatever the law allowed to get what was owed me, and with it, the surgery that could buy me back time. Revenge, I realized, was simply justice served on terms that hurt the arrogant and comforted the honest, and Marcus had made it easy to start. Outside, the day warmed. Inside, I began to make my list: witness follow-ups, a calendar of court dates to prepare for, a note to remind me to check my phone every morning for Hayes's updates. The hunt was methodical now, like a rig crew prepping for a long, ugly pull. My chest hurt, but my hands were steady. My heart had one more fight left in it, and so did I. "How dare you hire a lawyer against your own son?" Marcus's voice sliced through the receiver, sharp with indignation, trembling with fear disguised as anger. I forced myself to keep my tone level, professional, as though we were two businessmen debating a contract instead of father and son circling the ashes of our family. "You brought this on yourself," I said evenly, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "That money went into your house. I can't just liquidate $280,000 and hand it back to you on a whim. Do you have any idea what you're asking?" "I'm asking you to honor the promise you made 3 years ago," I replied. My eyes locked on the little red timer of the recording app as it ticked forward, capturing every word of his panic. "The promise Hank Miller witnessed. The promise you repeated in your own text messages." There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice dropped lower, hardening into something dangerous, something cold that made my stomach knot. "If you go through with this legal action, I'll never speak to you again. You'll never see your grandchildren. Anna and I will cut you out of our lives completely." "Then prepare for court, son," I said quietly. The words hung between us like smoke, heavy and suffocating. I could hear him breathing fast, ragged, could picture him pacing that cavernous living room of his, the one with the vaulted ceilings and polished marble floors, where he once looked me in the eye and said my life wasn't worth saving. "You're destroying our family over money," he cried, his voice cracking with desperation. "You destroyed our family when you called my surgery a waste of money." I shot back. "When you said I'd lived long enough." I was upset. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I cut him off. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "And now you'll face the consequences." His composure unraveled, panic spilling out, sharp and shrill. "I'll fight this. I'll get my own lawyer. I'll prove that money was a gift, not a loan." "Good luck with that," I said. "Hank remembers every word you said, and your own text messages prove otherwise. Hayes is confident we'll win." "Hayes? Who's Hayes?" "My attorney. You'll be hearing from him soon enough." The silence that followed stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Then came his voice, hollow, stripped of everything but rage and finality. "If you go through with this, you're dead to me permanently." "I don't care anymore," I said, and I meant it. I truly meant it. "You've already shown me exactly what I'm worth to you." The line went dead with a sharp click, a sound like a door slamming shut on 35 years of fatherhood. I stared at the screen, then labeled the file, "Marcus' Final Conversation," and slid it into my legal documents folder. Tomorrow Hayes would hear exactly what kind of son I had raised. I hadn't slept much after that call, but the sleepless hours didn't leave me hollow. They filled me with steel. Again and again I replayed his threats, his admissions, the pitiful cracks in his voice, and each time they sharpened my resolve. By dawn my thoughts and documentation were organized with almost military precision. My body was weary, but my mind, my heart felt more awake than it had in weeks. The morning air bit with a crispness that made every detail sharper, every sound clearer. The limestone facade of the Bexar County Courthouse loomed ahead, its neoclassical columns rising like sentinels, the carved words "Equal Justice Under Law" etched above the bronze doors that gleamed in the rising sun. Justice. The word tasted almost sweet on my tongue. Hayes was waiting by the entrance, briefcase in one hand, a manila folder fat with evidence in the other. He extended his hand, grip firm, eyes alive with determination. "Ready for this, Vernon?" "More than ready," I said, gripping back. "Let's make Marcus face the consequences of his choices." Inside, the courthouse security screening reminded me of an airport, but heavier, weightier, as though every hum of the metal detectors carried the burden of Texas justice. Guards with practiced indifference watched us pass through, eyes dulled by endless parades of families cannibalizing themselves over money, land, and betrayal. My manila folder slipped into the X-ray machine like any ordinary piece of business, but inside it carried 3 years of broken promises and documented lies that would soon shatter Marcus's carefully crafted world. The halls buzzed with the muted intensity of legal business. Lawyers in polished shoes strode past, their case files clutched like shields. Their heels echoed against marble floors that had borne witness to decades of custody battles, contested wills, and property feuds. Court reporters wheeled their stenography machines toward doorways, ready to record the precise moment another family was split open under the scalpel of law. The elevator rose to the 3rd floor. With a mechanical groan, each floor passed like the drumbeat of inevitability. Hayes flipped through our paperwork one last time. Bank statements showing the $280,000 transfers, canceled checks made out for the down payment, notarized witness statements, and those damning recorded conversations where Marcus admitted his inability to repay and threatened permanent estrangement. Each piece was methodically organized, a weapon polished and ready for the fight. "This is the strongest family loan case I've handled in 30 years, Hayes murmured as we stepped into the civil filing office. His words were calm, but his eyes gleamed with certainty. "Your documentation is exceptional." The filing office bustled with bureaucratic rhythm, clerks processing divorces, custody disputes, property disagreements with the bored efficiency of those who had seen love curdle into hatred too many times to count. When our turn came, the clerk reviewed the filing, her face blank, professional, stamping each page with authority. "Case number CV2-02-54821, she announced. "Sado versus Sado has been accepted and entered into the court system." I signed the lawsuit documents with my own hand, each letter etched like a nail hammered into Marcus's coffin of arrogance. The pen felt heavier than it should, weighted with the knowledge that I was officially severing what remained of our bond, but he had made this choice when he called my survival a waste of money. The $500 filing fee stung. It came from my meager pension savings, but in that moment it felt like the wisest investment I had ever made. Every dollar was a step closer to justice, a down payment on the surgery that would decide whether I lived or died. Hearing date is scheduled for Wednesday, May 15th, 10 a.m. Courtroom 204. The clerk droned, stamping the documents with a finality that transformed personal betrayal into permanent record. I nodded, heart steady, as the weight of it settled over me. The war had officially begun. Both parties would receive official notification by certified mail. 6 weeks. 6 weeks for the machinery of the law to grind slowly, relentlessly, until Marcus's defenses were reduced to dust. Yet, as Hayes spoke, I couldn't help but wonder, would my failing heart last long enough to see justice served? The thought must have summoned it, because as we turned toward the elevator, a wave of dizziness slammed into me like a physical blow. The polished courthouse corridor swayed, the floor tilting under my feet. I gripped the cold marble wall for balance, willing the room to steady, desperate not to betray my weakness in front of Hayes. "Vernon, are you all right? You've gone pale?" he asked, his voice low but laced with concern. "I'm fine," I lied, though the tightness spreading across my chest told another story. My vision cleared slowly, and with it came the message I couldn't ignore. Time was running out, faster than I'd hoped. What mattered, though, was this: the case was filed. My son's betrayal, our family's ruin, was now etched into the public record. Hayes's eyes lingered on me, reading signs of distress I thought I'd hidden. The gaze of a man who had seen too many clients collapse under the weight of stress and grief. 6 weeks gives us plenty of time to prepare," he said gently. "Rest. Let me handle the details from here." 6 weeks, I repeated under my breath as I sank onto a courthouse bench. Lawyers and their clients streamed past me, each carrying their own family disasters in manila folders and briefcases. I thought of them: parents fighting over custody, siblings tearing each other apart over property, spouses dividing lives into halves, and I realized how common betrayal really was. Yet, no matter how universal, nothing felt more personal, more cutting, than the wound inflicted by my own son. The chest pain eased, leaving behind a grim satisfaction that warmed me deeper than anything I'd felt since this nightmare began. Marcus had made his choice 3 years ago, when he took my money under the promise of repayment he never intended to keep. He'd confirmed it when he called my life a waste. Now, the law would force the choice back upon him. We walked out into the Texas sun, the courthouse looming behind us like a fortress of judgment. My lawsuit against my son was now alive, breathing in ink and signatures, and I had 6 weeks to prepare for the fight that would decide everything: my health, my future, and whether betrayal could truly be answered with justice. Those 6 weeks blurred past in a haze of evidence review, late-night calls with Hayes, and sleepless nights punctuated by chest pains I dared not acknowledge. Witness preparation, legal briefs, and cold anxiety consumed me. By the morning of the trial, I stood before the mirror in the navy suit I had worn on my wedding day 38 years ago. It still fit, though the man in the glass looked thinner, more angular, carved by stress and determination. Courtroom 204 felt less like a chamber of law, and more like a cathedral of reckoning. Its high ceiling rose like the vaults of a church, the American flag hung proud, and the seal of Texas glared from behind Judge Patricia Morrison's bench. The air hummed with quiet tension, as if the walls themselves remembered the hundreds of families broken inside these doors. I arrived early, settling into the plaintiff's table. Minutes later, Marcus walked in. He looked the same as ever: sharp suit, styled hair, but the moment our eyes met, I saw it, the tremor beneath the facade. His attorney, a young man in an expensive suit, moved with the unease of someone who'd rather be anywhere but standing between a father's evidence and a son's guilt. The tension between us filled the room like electricity before a storm. We had not spoken since that final recorded call, and today, our voices would only reach each other through the filter of lawyers and testimony. Behind me in the gallery, Hank Miller sat straight-backed, his best shirt pressed, his expression calm and steady. He had the look of a man incapable of lying, a man whose word carried more weight than any legal brief. His presence felt like an anchor in turbulent waters, grounding me. Hayes rose first. His voice filled the courtroom with the confidence of 30 years spent in Texas courtrooms. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Vernon Sato loaned his son Marcus $280,000 for a house purchase. The repayment promise was explicit, documented by bank records, witnessed by third parties, and confirmed in the defendant's own electronic communications. Marcus's attorney countered with predictable arguments that it was a gift, that no parent should expect repayment, that family money comes with no legal strings, but his delivery lacked conviction. The evidence was too solid, too overwhelming. "Mr. Sato Sr., Judge Morrison called. Please take the stand." My legs carried me forward with surprising steadiness. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and looked the judge squarely in the eye. "Your Honor," I said, my voice even despite the ache in my chest, "this was a loan. My son asked me to help him buy a house, and he called it a loan he would repay within a year. I believed him, because he was my son. I documented everything, because I trusted, but I also knew promises have a way of fading. He never repaid me, and when I asked, he told me my life wasn't worth the money. Cross-examination was short and ineffective. No clever questions could unravel bank records, notarized witness statements, and Marcus's own words. Then Hank took the stand. He folded his weathered hands, and spoke with the calm simplicity of a man who had nothing to hide. I personally heard Marcus say, "Dad, this is a loan, I'll pay you back." Those were his exact words. At Vernon's kitchen table, 3 years ago, when the judge called a recess to review the evidence, I sat trembling, not from fear, but from the waves of dizziness that returned, each one a reminder that my heart was racing against time. When Judge Morrison returned, her face betrayed nothing, but her voice carried finality. Based on the evidence presented, bank records, witness testimony, and electronic communications, I find for the plaintiff judgment in the amount of $280,000 against the defendant Marcus Sato, payment to be made within 30 days, through property transfer or sale if necessary. The gavel struck with a sound that shook through me like thunder. Marcus slumped in his chair, the weight of defeat finally breaking through his arrogance. Hayes clasped my hand, his grip strong, his smile certain. "Congratulations, Vernon. Complete victory." But I wasn't celebrating. My eyes drifted to the calendar. I had more urgent business. My surgery, my life. Justice mattered, yes, but survival mattered more. The next 2 months unfolded like a controlled avalanche. Court-ordered property transfer by June 15th. Sale to cash buyers from Austin by June 20th. A deal closed at $290,000, $10,000 more than Marcus owed me. Justice with interest. On June 25th, Dr. Ramirez opened my chest and repaired my failing heart. When I woke, breath filled my lungs cleanly for the first time in years. "The surgery was completely successful," she said, her professional voice soft with satisfaction. "You have many good years ahead of you, Mr. Sato." And for the first time in a long while, I believed her. 2 months later, I sat on my porch in the golden wash of an August evening, when a familiar BMW pulled into my driveway. Marcus stepped out slowly. His clothes were wrinkled, his confidence gone. He looked like a man hollowed out, stripped of everything but desperation. He approached the porch steps with hands clasped as if in prayer. "Dad," he whispered, voice trembling, "please forgive me. My family has nowhere to live." I studied him, 35 years old, broken, finally tasting the consequences of his choices. I remembered his words like a knife in my ribs. "You've lived long enough." "You said I'd lived long enough," I answered, my voice carrying the weight of his own cruelty. "Now you can learn what that means." His face crumpled. For a moment I thought I might feel pity, but there was nothing left. He had chosen this path, and I had survived it. "Get off my property," I said quietly, "and don't come back." I watched him retreat to the BMW, the car he would likely have to sell, the last emblem of his squandered comfort. I sat back in my chair, breathing easily, my chest whole again, and I realized that justice had been served completely. I was alive, healthy, financially whole. My son had faced the cost of his betrayal, but as the sun dipped lower, painting the Texas sky in crimson, I also understood the true price of victory. Family could be the source of the deepest love or the sharpest betrayal. Justice had won, yet winning had cost me everything else. Hayes would see me in a few minutes, the receptionist had said. He kept his stride, the confident gait of a man who'd spent 3 decades doing battle in Texas courtrooms. When the office door opened, and Gordon Hayes stepped into the narrow reception area, every part of him announced the kind of person who had turned countless fights into wins. Not flashy, just competent, calibrated. He was average height, hair salt and pepper, wearing a suit that had seen many court dates, but still hung with sober authority. His handshake was firm. His eyes, quick and assessing, took me in like a man cataloging fact after fact. "Mr. Sato, please come in," he said. "I understand you have a family matter that needs attention." His office was functional. Instead of fancy law books lined the walls, family photos softened the shelves, and a Texas bar certificate hung in a simple frame above his desk. This was a working lawyer, the kind of man you wanted running into battle for you. I spread my documents across his desk with methodical care. Bank statements showing the $280,000 withdrawal, copies of canceled checks, the screenshots of Marcus's texts, Hank's notarized witness statement. Hayes examined each page as if he were reading a map. There was a clear trail, a straight path from my savings to Marcus's title, and a promise stamped in ink and in voice. "Sato," he said finally, tapping points into his legal pad. "The key question is whether we can prove this was a loan, not a gift." "I have every bank record, every check I wrote," I said, feeling oddly detached as I spoke, as if I were reporting weather, and a witness. "Hank was there when Marcus promised to pay me back." Hayes leaned back, the guarded curiosity on his face smoothing into an expression of professional optimism. "Then we have a strong case. Family claims that money transfers are gifts all the time, but witness testimony changes everything. My fee is $15,000 as retainer, plus 25% of any recovery. Given your documentation, I'm confident we can get you paid back. $15,000 would take most of my remaining savings." It felt obscene to hand that much money over to fight for money I'd already given away, but I signed the retainer with hands that were steadier than I felt. Hope is a surgical instrument in its own right. It can cut through the hardest tissue. The next days moved with the single-minded intensity of a man building scaffolding around a desperate plan. Hayes revised our demand letter until it read like an ultimatum. Hank notarized his statement, and like a faithful witness, sat with me through the nervous calls. I scanned every paper with my old HP scanner, until my kitchen table became a battlefield mapped with receipts and ledgers, every sheet a piece of evidence. When Hayes mailed the certified demand, direct, legal, impossible to ignore, he suggested I do nothing rash. Let the letter do the work. Document everything. Save every call. Don't let anger push you into mistakes. Marcus answered on the phone, the way I'd feared and expected. Threats, bluster, his voice catching when I named Hayes. He told me he'd cut me out of his life. He warned of consequences. He tried the old bully's trick, and threatened to turn our private life into public shame. I recorded the call, just as Hayes suggested. It revealed the shape of the man he had become, loud and brittle, and terrified. When the paper that mattered finally moved, when our filing was accepted, and the clerk stamped the suit into the court system, the lawyers and judges in their quiet robes began drawing the outline of something final. Case number CV202548821. The clerk read in that flat tone that made private sorrow public. Sato versus Sato. There were moments between that filing and the hearing that felt like standing on a shoreline waiting for a storm. Sometimes my chest would tighten so badly, I thought the moment had come. Hayes kept a steady hand on the legal wheel. Hank came to court and sat behind me like the backbone of a man who'd kept his word. I wore the navy suit from my wedding day. It fit like a skin I had earned. Courtroom 204 smelled of old wood and new papers. Judge Patricia Morrison presided with the businesslike gravity of someone who knows the law is a scalpel we sometimes wield poorly. Hayes' opening was crisp. Marcus's lawyer tried every argument about family gifts and the sanctity of private arrangements, but you can only spin silk so far when the raw fabric of bank records and text messages and eyewitness testimony holds up. I took the stand, saying the words out loud. The loan, the handshake, the promise felt like pulling nails that had been stuck into my palms. Hank testified like the man he was, plain, honest, a backbone in a world full of spin. Marcus's defense was theatrical but thin. The judge called a recess, read our evidence, and when she returned, the room held its breath. Based on the evidence presented, she said, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Judgment for $280,000. The gavel's fall was thunder. Marcus looked broken in a way anger never broke him before. Defeated, suddenly small. Hayes squeezed my shoulder. We did it, he said quietly. Now we enforce. The law moves with the patience of gears. Judgment Day is not always celebration but consequence. The court ordered options. Transfer of property, sale, whatever satisfied the debt. Marcus tried stall tactics and bluster. The law ignored both. The notary office on Nacogdoches Road took his signature with a bureaucrat's calm. Investors from Austin, cold calculators and suits, bought the house for $290,000. That extra $10,000 felt like interest and vindication rolled into one small, merciless figure. I handed the hospital the check in person, the stack of paper that had once sat in my account now moving back toward me. Dr. Ramirez's eyes, those steady, kind eyes, sparked a private kind of joy. We can schedule the surgery now, she said. Next week. The triple bypass was everything she promised. Precise, terrifying, miraculous. I woke up in recovery with a chest that no longer felt like a jagged pit, but like something stitched whole. I remember the first breath after the operation, the clean, honest air that filled me without pain. For the first time in months, I slept through an entire night. There is a sweet, awful clarity in victory. For weeks afterward, I found myself noticing small things. How the light fell on the porch in the late afternoon. How the neighborhood kids raced down the sidewalk. How simple breakfast tasted when your body isn't a countdown. I'd bought life, and in the process, gotten back money I'd loaned away. Justice, mechanically applied, had rewritten a small part of our family ledger. Marcus returned when the house closed, a shadow of the swagger he used to wear. He walked up my steps slowly, jaw tight, hands clumsy with the kind of apology that's never more than an opening plea. "Dad," he said, voice small, "please forgive me. We have nowhere to go." "Anna," he stopped. The rest of his plea dissolved into ragged breath. I had rehearsed anger 1,000 different ways in my head, the righteous, the vengeful, the pained, but when he stood before me, 35 years old and stripped, I felt a coldness that surprised me. It was not cruelty. It was the quiet of a man who understood that some things, once broken, cannot be fixed by apology. "You said I'd lived long enough," I told him, the words falling like a verdict. I heard no tremor in my throat. "You told me my life wasn't worth the cost. Now you get to live with the consequences." His face went slack. He opened his mouth, closed it, made motions that were almost, but not quite, a plea for mercy. I listened to the sound of his shame, as if it were a wind through bare branches. "Get off my property," I said finally. "And don't come back." He obeyed. The BMW's engine started with a small mechanical whine, and then he drove away. His house sold. His comfort evaporated into paperwork and cold cash. Anna stayed. She had her pride and her fears and her own choices to measure, but that was no longer my business. Sitting on my porch that evening, the August sky deepening into violet, I thought about the cost of victory. I was alive. The surgery had worked. I'd held justice's slow hand and watched it return what was legally mine, but the ledger had a balance that law could not touch. Years of shared meals, scraped knees, late-night talks. Those entries had been erased in a single bitter paragraph of court documents. Winning had been necessary. It had also been lonely. Hank stopped by with 2 beers and a smile that had seen too many hard years. We sat in the cooling dark, talking about rigs and oil wells, and the small mercies of a life that keeps going. "You did what you had to do," he said simply. "You put things right." That night I slept with a sense of peace I hadn't felt for a long time, not because the past had been fixed, but because I had acted to preserve my future. Revenge, if that is the word you want, felt less like malice and more like reclamation. I had reclaimed my dignity, my health, and a fairness that had been denied. Years later, sometimes I would see Marcus on the edge of town, a silhouette I barely recognized. Time had thinned him, and he had work to do that looked honest and hard. He never came back to ask for forgiveness again, at least not from me. Maybe he made peace in quieter rooms. Maybe he learned what poverty means when it is earned by the consequences of your own choices. I spent those years savoring the small luminous things, the sound of granddaughter laughter at a distance I never allowed before, the satisfaction of a repaired fence, the slow pleasure of mornings when my chest was full of easy air. I took the long way home sometimes, just to watch the sky change. I gave Hank and a few others what I could: thanks in envelopes, invites for dinner, a seat on the porch. At the end of the day, I had what mattered to me most: more years of morning light, the taste of good coffee, and the knowledge that I had stood up for myself when it counted. The law had been my tool. Justice had its price. I paid for it with sleepless nights and the quiet ache of loss, but in paying, I bought back from a son's betrayal the most precious commodity: the chance to breathe. Some victories leave you empty. This one left me whole in a way I didn't expect, scarred certainly, but breathing, and that after all was everything.